29 years. That's how long a 6-year-old girl has been waiting for justice. 29 Christmases have come and gone. 29 birthdays have passed in silence. While the world celebrated, JonBenét Ramsey lay asleep in her bed on Christmas night 1996. Hours later, she would be found lifeless in her own home, and an investigation unlike any other would begin. An investigation that, to this day, has not delivered a single conviction. Nearly 3 decades later, no one has been charged with her murder. How does something like this happen? How does a case so public, so heavily scrutinized, remain unresolved for so long? Was it truly a lack of evidence, or was it a failure to see what was right in front of us? How many crucial samples were never tested? How many questions never answered? How many opportunities wasted while the case sat cold? JonBenét's death was not just another tragedy. It was a reflection of how even the most shocking crimes can slip through the cracks of power, wealth, and influence. And now, nearly 30 years later, new forensic technology has raised a haunting possibility. Could modern science finally reveal the truth that investigators missed in 1996? Or has the evidence been compromised beyond repair? To understand where we are today, we have to revisit where this began. In the early hours of December 26, 1996, a frantic 911 call came from the Ramsey home in Boulder, Colorado. Patsy Ramsey, JonBenét's mother, reported her daughter missing. She claimed to have found a ransom note inside the house, a bizarre 2.5-page letter demanding $118,000, almost the exact amount of John Ramsey's Christmas bonus. Police arrived quickly, but from the very beginning, mistakes plagued the investigation. The crime scene was not properly secured. Friends and neighbors were allowed to walk through the house. Key evidence may have been touched, moved, even destroyed before forensic teams could document it. Hours later, John Ramsey made a horrifying discovery in the basement. JonBenét's body, covered with a white blanket, was found in a small windowless room. She had been strangled, and her skull showed evidence of a severe head injury. This was not an accident. It was a brutal homicide. But almost immediately, questions about the ransom note overshadowed the physical evidence. Handwriting experts disagreed on whether it matched Patsy Ramsey. Some said the note looked staged, almost theatrical. Others claimed it bore no resemblance to Patsy's writing. And still, to this day, the author of that note has never been conclusively identified. Back then, DNA testing was still developing. Analysts could only work with large, uncontaminated samples. In JonBenét's case, partial DNA profiles were found on her clothing, unknown male DNA that did not match any family members. Investigators hoped this would lead to a suspect, but the technology of the time was limiting. Mixed samples were nearly impossible to separate, and tiny traces of genetic material were often dismissed as contamination. Those limitations left key questions unanswered. Who did that DNA belong to? Was it the killers, or was it transferred accidentally during manufacturing or packaging? Fast forward nearly 30 decades, and the landscape of forensic science has transformed. Laboratories today can extract genetic material from items so small they were once ignored. Advanced sequencing can separate complex mixtures of DNA, identifying multiple contributors from a single swab. Evidence once considered unusable can now be tested with extraordinary precision. Experts say if the Ramsey evidence was retested with current methods, the results could be ready in weeks, not years, and could provide answers that investigators missed. Unknown DNA on JonBenét's clothing, fibers from the basement, even microscopic skin cells left behind on duct tape or rope, all of these can now be examined using technology that didn't exist in 1996. But why hasn't this been done? Why, after all this time, are critical items of evidence still locked away, untested by modern labs willing to take on the case? Some point to conflicts between police and prosecutors. Others suspect that officials fear exposing mistakes made in the original investigation. Whatever the reason, the result is the same. A child's murder remains unsolved, and the truth remains hidden in plain sight. Consider the basement where JonBenét was found. There was a broken window, an open suitcase, conflicting accounts of how an intruder could have entered or exited. Yet these clues were never fully resolved. Did someone truly break into the Ramsey home that night, or was this staged to mislead investigators? If an intruder was responsible, why was nothing stolen? If it was someone inside the house, how did they manage to leave no conclusive trace? The ransom note itself raises even more questions. It was unusually long, far longer than any typical ransom demand. It was written on paper from inside the Ramsey home, using a pen from inside the Ramsey home. What kidnapper sits down inside the victim's house to write a detailed letter? And yet, rather than focusing on this glaring oddity, the investigation fractured into competing theories. Some detectives became convinced the family was involved. Others believed an intruder committed the crime. The public watched as law enforcement turned against itself, and while they fought, the case stalled. Independent forensic experts have reviewed the evidence and asked questions the original investigation never answered. Could today's technology conclusively show whether the DNA on JonBenét's clothing came from a stranger? Could trace fibers in the basement link to someone outside the Ramsey household? Could advanced handwriting analysis reveal whether the ransom note was written by Patsy, John, or someone else entirely? These are no longer hypothetical questions. Modern tools can provide clear answers if they are allowed to be used. Nearly 30 decades have passed. JonBenét would be 35 years old today. Instead of living her life, her story is locked in evidence bags, sealed in court files, debated on television specials every few years, but never resolved. And if this could happen to a child from a prominent family under a national spotlight, how many cases like this go unsolved for children whose names we'll never know? How many murders remain cold simply because evidence wasn't retested, or because authorities refused to admit they got it wrong the first time? In recent years, private labs have offered to test the Ramsey evidence. Families of cold case victims have successfully used these same methods to identify unknown killers, even decades later. Yet the decision to retest JonBenét's evidence rests in the hands of officials who have hesitated, delayed, and declined to move forward. Why? What are they afraid of finding?
The truth is, modern forensic science has solved cases older than this one. Criminals have been identified from DNA left on a postage stamp, a cigarette butt, a single hair. If these methods can work for strangers, why not for JonBenét? The technology is ready. The evidence still exists. The only barrier is willpower. So we have to ask, was this really an intruder who slipped past security and escaped unnoticed? Or was the entire crime scene carefully staged to mislead investigators? If the media hadn't turned the case into a spectacle, would the evidence have been handled differently? Have decades of speculation and sensational headlines buried the real story under layers of myth and distraction? Every year, new documentaries, interviews, and lawsuits bring this case back into public view. Every year, we are told justice might finally be coming. Yet every year, nothing changes. The files stay closed, the samples stay untested, and a 6-year-old girl remains without justice. JonBenét Ramsey's murder is more than just an unsolved crime. It is a warning. It shows how investigations can be derailed by politics, by media pressure, by personal bias. It shows how a child's death can be overshadowed by theories and finger-pointing instead of facts. And it forces us to ask a chilling question. If this case can remain unsolved for nearly 30 years, how many others have we already forgotten? 29 years is too long. Modern science can deliver answers. The technology is here. The evidence is here. The only question is whether those in power are willing to face the truth. Will we demand that every lead be retested, every clue re-examined? Or will another Christmas pass, another birthday pass, with no justice for JonBenét?